Curley's reaction was to tell Jerry Sandusky, simply don't go in the shower anymore with kids. Does that make any sense? Does that make any sense to anybody that something like that could have been conveyed? Tim Curley, I'll say this about Tim Curley and Gary Schultz and Coach Paterno. They're not my personal friends, so I don't speak from a friendship standpoint, but they are very good people. They are very conservative people. They are people who care about kids. And if you think for a minute, if anyone is naive enough to think for a minute that Tim Curley, Joe Paterno, and Gary Schultz, and for that matter, Graham Spanier, the university president, were told by Mike McQuarrie that he observed Jerry Sandusky having anal sex with a 10-year-old looking kid in a shower room at Penn State, on Penn State property, and her response was simply to tell Jerry Sandusky that don't go in the shower room anymore with kids. I suggest you dial 1-800-REALITY, because that makes absolutely no sense. We don't know yet exactly what he said, but we do know what he said since. We know, for example, in emails, that he said to his friends that he broke up the assault and he called the police. And yet the police tell us that there were never any calls made by Mike McQuarrie to them about this incident. We also know, if you believe the story in the Harrisburg Patriot News, as reported by one of our reporters here, Sarah Gannam, who's in the stands today, that Dr. Drainoff was at the family home the night that Mike McQuarrie came home and said that he saw something. And if you believe the testimony, and we haven't verified it yet, Sarah would be the better source for that verification, but if that is accurate, Dr. Drainoff is a very well-respected doctor and a member of our community. If he said that when Mike McQuarrie said he saw Jerry in the shower, saw a kid in the shower, and he said, I asked him 3 times, did you see anything sexual? And according to the article Sarah Gannam wrote, Dr. Drainoff said Mike McQuarrie's response was no. That's totally consistent with what Jerry Sandusky says happened. It's totally consistent with what Tim Curley says happened. It's totally consistent with what Gary Schultz says happened, Graham Spanier says happened. So what's his motive? I don't know, but we'll find out. But we didn't need to find out today because we have enough inconsistencies at this point to totally wipe him off of our case. And one step further, to get back to the initial question about what was so important about Mike McQuarrie, he was the Commonwealth centerpiece. To the extent that we destroy his credibility, I think we put everybody else's credibility into question in this case. Sarah Gannam, you deserve a question. I'm having trouble hearing you, Sarah. Sarah's question was, because you probably didn't hear it over here, even if we succeed in attacking Mike McQuarrie's testimony and credibility, that's only one of 10 cases. But once we do that, I think people will start thinking about the credibility involved in the other cases. If you break the cases down, and I've told people this, sometimes it didn't get out to the public through interviews, but I've explained this from the beginning, we're attacking these cases one at a time. You know, if you look at 10, you say, oh my goodness, there's 10 cases. How can they all be making up these stories? Well, first of all, a number of these allegations don't involve actual sexual contact. They involve putting a hand on a knee or bear hugging a child in a shower, things of that nature. The other issue, which we're looking into, is whether or not a number of these kids, now grown men, have communicated prior to the filing of charges and after the filing of charges, and whether or not there's any possibility of some sort of collusion. Because we know that several of these kids knew each other. Once we get past the arraignment, which is scheduled for January 11th, we'll have the right to start asking the court to enter orders, getting us the ability to check phone records, text records, and see if there's any connections between these kids. And we think that that's a possibility, which we're investigating, and we're going to attack the credibility whichever way we can, and we think that we have ways to do that. So all we're saying is we're taking one case at a time, but McQuarrie was always the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. Do I have a strategy? I'm told I don't. But to be serious, when we knew that we were going to waive and we knew the Commonwealth would not call off its witnesses and we knew everybody was here, we realized that this was an opportunity for us to speak with you as opposed to piecemeal. Because, folks, I know many of you have tried to contact me and I haven't gotten back to you. It's not because I'm blowing you off. It's not because I'm ignoring you. It's simply because there's not enough time in the day for me to contact everybody individually. Well, I'll let you be the judge of that. But I'll tell you this, we're ready to defend. We've always been ready to defend. Today's waiver has nothing to do with conceding anything. There have been no plea negotiations. There will be no plea negotiations. This is a fight to the death. This is the fight of Jerry Sandusky's life. This goes beyond the Penn State-Miami game in '86. This is the game of his life.
Joe, how would you... Joe.
Yes, Jay. There are rumors that the grand jury is still meeting. There could be more accusers. The problem that the Commonwealth faces at this point, as well as us, how do you decipher credibility with people who are coming forward thinking at this point that there might be a payday with the big dollars involved with Penn State and with the second mile? So the Commonwealth has a big job to do. It's got to kind of sift through these new allegations wherever they may come up and decide if they're credible. But being credible doesn't mean they happen. So credibility will still be an issue with anybody else who comes forward at this point. And again, we're prepared. For example, the charges that were made last week, and you may recall, most of you, from what I understand, may have been contacted by the Attorney General's office prior to Jerry Sandusky being arrested. We always offered to bring Jerry Sandusky in to face charges. We always offered to turn him over peaceably and voluntarily. It was the Commonwealth who went forward and did the dog and pony show so all of you folks with your cameras could see Jerry being carted out in handcuffs, which creates a very negative image to the general public and implies some sort of guilt. Jerry Sandusky drove back from Cleveland, Ohio on a Friday night to face charges on a voluntary basis on Saturday morning after the Commonwealth wouldn't give us the courtesy of a call and knew that we would turn him in, and after they tried to go out to his home and arrest him. So even after that situation, they still chose to take him out of his home last week in handcuffs when they knew that we would turn him in and didn't give me the courtesy of a phone call. If you folks got a press release, that was more than I got. I didn't even get a tweet. So all I'm saying is the Commonwealth does what it has to do. We're doing what we have to do. Jerry Sandusky maintains his innocence, and we're going to fight like hell for him. Yes? No. Well, if you consider 20 to 40 a plea deal. That's never been offered.
Joe, how would you characterize your client's mental stability, and has he ever been under a suicide watch since this started?
Well, I think when he was incarcerated overnight last week, they were concerned about his mental health, not because he had indicated he was a danger, but simply because that's their procedure. But Jerry remains, I think, pretty well balanced in terms of what he's facing. He's depressed. He's devastated. Everything that he has worked for all of his life, working with kids, helping kids, has been overturned and turned upside down. You know, Jerry and his wife raised 6 adopted kids who they treated as their own. And Jerry and Dottie have said many times that one of the crushing aspects of this case is that some of the accusers were kids that they consider part of their extended family. That was one of the concessions. Yes. No, right now she's unrepresented. If there's any risk that she would be charged, we would get her separate counsel. I can't hear you. The answer is no. We don't know for certain. We were told that was a possibility, that Mike McQuarrie was going to be one of the witnesses. But the Commonwealth does not have to tell us who their witnesses are at a preliminary hearing. So we just basically are going to be here and see who they called to testify. I can't answer if the Commonwealth would have been reluctant to call him, but obviously they're going to have to call him on Friday, getting back to the comment about Friday's hearing. And that's why I said it was a close call. It was probably 51-49 that we debated that, and we really considered that aspect, and we felt that we were giving that part of our case up, but we were getting something in return. And what we were getting in return is eliminating the rehashing of all the allegations on tonight's newscast without really having an opportunity to test credibility and present our side of the case. But we also got some concessions from the Commonwealth, such as if there are any future charges, we're not going to be hauled off in handcuffs, and bail is not going to be increased, which the judge maintained bail today. So it was a trade-off.
Joe.
No, he's already entered his plea. He entered a plea today. His arraignment is scheduled for January 11th. We in Pennsylvania have a procedure where you can waive your appearance. We did that today. We entered a plea of not guilty and requested a jury trial. Yes, we already did, David. The arraignment, by the way, for educational purposes, the arraignment is simply a procedural matter. Nothing occurs other than the judge would say, if you show up, these are your charges, how do you plead? You'd plead not guilty, request a trial. The important thing about the arraignment, folks, it starts a legal time clock running. We have 7 days to ask for a bill of particulars. That's simply a legal request to the Commonwealth saying, tell us more specifically what you're alleging our client did, when he did it, with whom he did it, under what circumstances. We have 14 days from the arraignment to ask for discovery, which we will do earlier based upon my conversations with the Commonwealth attorney last evening. And we have 30 days from the arraignment to file pretrial motions. And those features will be very important in Jerry's case. The actual arraignment isn't, other than the fact it starts a time clock running. Well, I mean, we missed that opportunity, and as I said, it was a strategy decision that we weighed the pros and cons, but ultimately decided to go this way for the reasons I've earlier stated. The question was, why would we have not been allowed to test the credibility of witnesses? And the answer is, at a preliminary hearing, credibility is not an issue. There's court decisions that say credibility doesn't matter. If the Commonwealth presented one witness today who was totally incredible, and even if we had 15 people who could dispute that witness's testimony, the judge would have to take the testimony of the Commonwealth witness and evaluate that testimony alone without any credibility issue to determine whether or not the elements of the offenses had been made out. And if that witness established the elements of the offense, then those charges would go forward. So we could have cross-examined, but not about credibility. We could have asked, well, who was around when these acts occurred? What time of day was it? What time of night was it? But we can get that through regular discovery. We can get that through filing a bill of particulars. So again, that all went into the process of evaluating how to handle today's proceeding, given what we knew was going to occur.
So Joe, is it